Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'll start here. I think that this week, politically speaking, certainly in the United States of America and elsewhere, certainly, of course, in the UK with the riots taking place regarding Henry Nowak, but here in the United States, I think that the deep state civil war is in full effect. Everybody's very busy. There's a lot of different things taking place. There were congressional hearings all this week across numerous cabinet members involving many cabinet members. Scott Bessent, Mark Wayne McMullen, Marco Rubio, I believe Linda McMahon as well. There were just numerous hearings that took place all week. And the month of June is going to be a busy one, certainly with Supreme Court decisions coming up that are massive for this country. And again, it just seems like more protests are going to take place. You also have, of course, the Carmelo Anthony trial occurring as well. It's just, I don't know. It's everywhere. But for some reason, politically speaking, almost year in, year out, certainly within a primary election year and a midterm election year, the month of June is just super busy. And there's just, a gazillion things taking place. So let me try to get into some of this as best I can. First of all, I want to make mention of this, and this is a point that was reiterated by a Mr. Poole on X. This is not Tim Poole's account. This is another account. But they're, again, specifically talking about Iran, and more specifically, the mixed messaging that Donald Trump is doing, certainly with endless people. That he's not committing on Iran regarding one particular issue or another. Again, in one moment, he says we have a deal, and the next he says we don't. Again, somebody else says we don't have a deal, then we do. This should tell everybody, again, that there's a lot of kayfabe taking place with all of this. But to summarize all of this, again, I'm not the only person to say this, let alone believe it, but this Mr. Poole account certainly seems to agree. And they say the following here. Quote, he just told you in his own words on camera today. This would have been June 3rd. He said, quote, Donald Trump did, if they're confused, then the Iranians are confused too, unquote. It says the President of the United States just admitted publicly that every contradictory statement, every reversal, every mistake, quote unquote, was intentional. The blockade is on, then it's off, then it's on again. The deal is done, then it's not, then it is. 96 days of what looked like chaos, and it never was chaos, it was choreography. He told the interviewer, quote, I could give you an answer and then in 20 minutes go into the Oval Office and say, how are things going? And I would realize my answer is now incorrect, unquote. He said, read that again. He's telling you that the situation changes by the hour, that he operates in a tempo no journalist, no analyst, no enemy can follow. While the media called it incompetence, Iran could not determine what was real and what was misdirection. They could not plan, they could not position, they could not predict. That is not confusion, that is psychological warfare conducted in plain sight. In the same interview, he confirmed that he told Netanyahu, quote, you're crazy, everyone hates Israel because of this. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me, unquote. A sitting president does not say those words unless the leash has already been shortened. Netanyahu is no longer a partner, he's being managed. Rubio said today, quote, no agreement has been reached. Trump said today, we've already agreed no nuclear weapons. Both statements are true because there are two negotiations. The one Congress is allowed to see, and the one that was completed before the first missile was fired. The confusion was the weapon, and he just told you so. Forward this before it disappears, they said. Again, that makes sense. The media is the enemy, Congress is the enemy, regardless of, again, what political side of the aisle you want to sit on. The Senate is the enemy. They really don't know what's going on. Because in real warfare, you want confusion. You don't want to show your enemy your hand. And the enemy, of course, as we all know, is within our own country. It's our own government. Always has been. Even the Founding Fathers had their disagreements, but even the Founding Fathers were fighting the enemy from within, which was terrible. But that still exists to this day, certainly on a grander scale. I also understand, again, that these congressional hearings that take place, by and large, are a show. It is designed, again, to expose certain individuals sitting within Congress and within the Senate. And again, basically get them to step on their own words and trip up and make mistakes and be exposed. And again, these are all good things. But the one thing, again, that every American is wanting is real accountability. They want to see elected people go to jail. And again, individuals need to be shaken out of the left-right paradigm, and the way that you do that is by sending people to jail on both sides of the aisle who are guilty of the very same things. Again, you had Brandon Gill, for example, a representative from Texas. He's chairing a particular committee having to do with Somali fraud in Ohio. I don't understand why a Texas congressman is involved in that. It seems like something an Ohio congressman should be involved in, because again, if it pertains to Ohio, that's kind of a problem. But this kind of fraud exists in Texas. So again, I don't know if his committee is going to be looking at fraud nationwide with the help of the federal government, of course, in the executive branch. But I understand, again, that a dog is going to get a bone here every now and again, and your average American might tune into some of these hearings and say, okay, this is a bigger problem, and now they're covering this for the first time. But you're getting a lot of these state politicians showing up, certainly at the local level, like local representatives, and even they're being exposed within these hearings as basically saying, well, I'm offended that you would think that Somali fraud is a problem, or that you would just associate Somalis with fraud within the state of Ohio. This was one of the Democrat senators from the state of Ohio who was basically being interviewed during that particular committee. And again, she's completely unhinged. This kind of fraud, again, is happening right under their nose, probably with their participation and their knowledge. And they're not doing anything about it. But when the truth gets brought to them, they're offended by it. Well, if you're offended by the truth and you're offended by individuals in your own state breaking the law, you are the problem. This right here, again, is the accountability that people want to see. They want to see these individuals, again, be exposed for what they're saying and how they're behaving at the federal level. But here at the state level, we want to see them get arrested. Because there's no way that a state house senator in Ohio, or representative or whomever, goes to a Washington, D.C. committee hearing on fraud, openly says, well, I'm offended that you would even ask that question, and then have that not expose them as being somebody who's directly connected to the fraud. Again, you would think that if you received an invitation by one of these committees about fraud, you wouldn't want to go, because if you go, you're going to sit on one of two sides of the issue. You're going to either be the person who's trying to expose it and trying to hold people accountable, or you're going to be the politician who's trying to cover it up because you've engaged in it and you've allowed it to happen. But these people are stupid. And this, too, I think, is a part of the plan, is to expose these people. I understand the exposure operation. I fully get it. But at the same time, you have to drop the hammer on these people eventually. That has to happen. So, committees left and right for lots of different reasons. Again, I fully get it. A lot of people are getting exposed in these committees. Very famously, Senator Ron Wyden of Washington was exposed by Scott Bessent because Ron Wyden's son, one of his largest investments was a cabaret business. That, again, he was looking into Jeffrey Epstein as being one of the major financiers of a cabaret business. This is the son of a senator. Jewish, I might add. But again, the exposure is great, makes for great clips, finds it very interesting. It's mic drop material. It silences these senators and these people when they get exposed. Elizabeth Warren has the stones to actually question Scott Bessent on Donald Trump making money while sitting in the White House, again, when it comes to Wall Street deals or this, that, or the other. And this is coming from, again, Elizabeth Warren. She's been doing that her entire career, insider trading in XYZ. I don't like anybody who does it, but unfortunately, it's the cost of doing business, and it's one of the things that gets done. So their back and forth was rather ridiculous. But again, this is the issue here. This is always going to be the issue. This is a huge deep state war, and these people, again, do not want to give up an inch, and everybody blames one another, and they're pointing fingers all of the time, and it's exhausting. But this month is going to be wild. So let me get into a few other things here. I do want to mention this just as a side note, because this is good. This is good news, and this should tell people that there is a changing of the guard here and that something else is going on. CBS is basically now, certainly their editorial board, is being run completely differently. And it's being run by Barry Weiss. And I don't know if somebody got to Barry Weiss somewhere along the line during the Q operation or whatever it was to put her in a position to where she could basically fire individuals at CBS who have been these long-standing deep state apparatus figureheads. But either way, they're completely dismantling 60 Minutes, the television show, on Sunday evenings, which is fantastic. You had Anderson Cooper retire, and now you have, let me see here, it's at the very least, it's Scott Pelley, but it's others as well. There's a female who was also fired from 60 Minutes, but the Scott Pelley firing I find to be fascinating, because this is one of those firings where he's always been a pompous windbag. This guy, again, chews on his glasses in a very pretentious way that only a pretentious person could. And he's been on 60 Minutes for a very long time, again, pretending to be a know-it-all, pretending to be a real journalist. And the fact is that he just disagrees with the fact that the organization is being run a completely different way now, and that they're trying to take bias out of the element and certainly out of the equation, because the Barack Obama administration gave them carte blanche to do whatever they wanted to do all of the time. And they did. But now, again, they're starting to run more different kinds of stories, like health-related stories and national history kinds of stories and things of that nature. Whereas, again, a Scott Pelley would, I don't know, go work out with Hugh Jackman in his gym, and that couldn't get more gay if it wanted to. But at the exact same time, he would, again, do whatever he had to do to try to go after Donald Trump and go after American citizens. And again, wouldn't cover those stories of real American citizens being targeted by government. So the hypocrisy is endless, but I'm telling you, knocking off these big CBS people is a big, big deal. These familiar faces that endless Americans have seen on their televisions for decades is a good thing. And this really is, I think, a serious changing of the old guard. So I applaud all of those moves. I think that's a very, very cool thing. And these people are being shuffled into the pool of irrelevancy, where no one really gives a damn what they do after they leave these particular positions because no one cares. It's like Jim Acosta. No one cares what he thinks. No one cared what he thought to begin with. I don't think Jim Acosta was an actor of any kind. I don't think he was in on the plan to take the left further left. I really do think he's a communist. Same thing with Scott Pelley. These people are everywhere. But once they leave their immediate position that they're known for, no one ever recognizes them ever again. They just go away. And that's a very, very good thing. I want to make mention of this too. And again, I think this is one of those things that can be debated, certainly from a social standpoint, and certainly, again, a geopolitical standpoint too. We, of course, have the 250th anniversary of our country upon us here. And Washington, D.C., of course, is being renovated for endless reasons. Again, many of them are national security reasons. Many of them, of course, are draining the swamp, literally and figuratively. And, of course, reversing the vandalism that took place during the Obama administration, during the Biden administration, and certainly during the summer of 2020. The restorations that have occurred within Washington, D.C. are all over social media. Anybody can look them up, watch the videos of them, the whole thing. It is pretty incredible. I mean, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. It really is beautiful, and it looks fantastic. People also, again, have to understand that the desecration of monuments and statues and property and all of it, which, again, is owned by the people. I mean, it was our tax dollars that paid for it, so it's owned by us. That all of that is done to demoralize a country. And all of that, again, is to demoralize the people who live within a specified area. But when you do it to the capital of your country, it doesn't get more defining than that when it comes to demoralization. Trying to, again, trick people into believing that they don't need it, don't want it, and that it doesn't matter. Well, I understand that from a biblical standpoint because it really doesn't matter. Jesus matters, not statues and monuments and things of that nature. But when you have monuments and statues to, again, certain events or certain figures or whatever,
you don't want them desecrated for endless reasons. So I applaud Donald Trump and the administration for cleaning them up, because based on what they used to look like and based on what they look like now, it's night and day. And it really is gorgeous. I saw pictures even not just of the Columbus fountain and things of that nature, but there's a wonderful statue of Andrew Jackson that was, again, completely renovated. Brand new marble underneath the statue. Statue itself was cleaned up. The entire area around it was cleaned up when, again, it was vandalized by Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and every other stupid communist that exists. But it really is gorgeous. And that's a big, big deal. The flip side of the coin is that with the 250th anniversary, you, of course, have all of these games being played in Washington, D.C., specifically, again, having to do with the UFC fight and then the race car race that's going to take place throughout the streets of D.C. and whatever else. Everybody has differing opinions on all of it, and I'm just going to kind of leave mine out of it. But I will say this, that anytime you increase the likelihood of events like that taking place, you increase the likelihood of the politicization of the entire process, which I don't like. You could just have the event, let everybody show up, and not politicize it by any stretch. For example, there are reports that Erica Kirk is going to be emceeing the UFC fight. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's embarrassing. I mean, I have to laugh because it's just embarrassing. I think everybody recognizes her as being a complete fraud. It doesn't matter, again, where a person sits on the political side of things. She's, overexposure is her middle name, and I think that's putting it mildly. You also have apparently Sean Strickland, who is a United States champion for UFC. Again, not that UFC matters, but you have him basically being barred from the event altogether because of his criticism of Donald Trump, Israel, Netanyahu, and the like. Again, Sean Strickland doesn't know the ins and outs of everything that's going on. He punches people in the face for a living, and good for him. I root for him. I like him. He's fine. He's ignorant on a great deal of issues, but whatever. Either way, barring somebody from an event and keeping them from showing up, that's not very constitutional. That's not very First Amendment. So I can see the hypocrisy in a lot of different things that, again, are taking place. Not to mention the entire White House grounds and the lawn out in front of the White House have been ripped up to basically put in this giant UFC stadium. Again, I'm not sure that's what I would do if I was president. I don't think I would have a UFC fight on the lawn of the White House, but it's his event, I guess. He's putting it on. There's numerous donors, most of which are Jewish and Israeli. Certainly UFC is a Jewish organization. I think everybody understands that. But even so, it's not necessarily something that I would do. I think the race car driving thing, whether they be F1 or IndyCar, or I think it's IndyCar if I'm not mistaken, that taking place throughout the streets of Washington is a rather cool and unique thing. I don't think that's ever been done before. But again, it draws people's attention to it. But then a thinking person also has to say, okay, I understand the celebration aspect of it. It's unique. It's never been done before. I fully get it. But at the same time, what else is it distracting from? And that becomes a question, again, that logical people would ask themselves, certainly from a political standpoint. So, you can play tennis and ping pong with this back and forth all you want. And endless people do, and I fully get it. But it just seems, again, that the more that you invite donors and sponsors and other organizations and groups and CEOs into an event or an anniversary like this, the more likely things are to get politicized, and the more likely people are to be excluded from particular activities or purposefully included in particular activities that don't necessarily look tasteful on either side of, again, whatever point is trying to be made. I mean, that alone itself becomes part of the distraction, which takes away from the actual anniversary itself. But again, it's complicated. And I would fully understand that it is complicated. And that, again, when you're the president of the United States, you're just one person. And that, again, when you're the president of the United States, you got a lot of people in your ear, and you've got a lot of advisors and a lot of donors and a lot of people who have their hands out and a lot of people who have cash in hand, and they want to shake your hand after they give you cash, and they want particular favors, and they want to make deals and X, Y, Z. And of course, everybody says that these events are free. Anybody can show up. We know that's not true. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want a front row seat, you're going to pay for it. And it's going to be a donor who gets a front row seat to that UFC fight. It's going to be a front row seat for the person who makes the biggest donation to the IndyCar thing. They're going to get the best seats in the house. I mean, that's really what's taking place. But making the 250 anniversary again about sporting events and sports ball and bread and circus stuff, that's just, it's not my cup of tea. It's not what I would choose to do. Again, I understand the pomp and circumstance. I get it. But it's just not, it's not something that would ever cross my mind. It's like watching the NBA on Christmas Day. It's just, it seems ridiculous to me. It's not my cup of tea. It's not what I would do. But there are people who do it, and there are people who enjoy it, and I guess, good for them, I suppose. But like I said, when you invite in numerous events and numerous groups and you have, differing activities, apparently there's some kind of a concert that's going to be taking place. Well, that's going to be politicized, and it already has been. You have individuals, again, who signed up to be there and sing and do whatever they do, and a bunch of people are backing out for their own political reasons. And of course, they're showing their hypocrisy in the entire thing. I mean, how many times can we hear Kid Rock at a particular event? It's a bit exhausting, but whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's losing its flavor. I mean, that kind of stuff is losing its flavor, and like I said, it's a distraction from the importance of the anniversary. The anniversary is a big deal from a historic standpoint, so it seems like you would want to make it a big deal from a historic standpoint. You would want to do whatever you could, of course, to highlight the history of our nation, which I know is happening. Again, the restoration of the entire city. I get it. It's perfect. That part of it I really enjoy. I really do. But it's just when you bring in, again, all these other activities, expecting them to not be politicized, and then have that just wear on people and become tiring, I think is a bit short-sighted. You would think, again, that you would want to kind of keep those particular individuals and activities as far away from an anniversary like this as possible. So, I don't know. That's like I said, it's just me, but it is what it is. I mean, I understand, again, that the World Cup is taking place here this month also. And I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to watch. Probably none at all. It's just, again, it's just not something that I pay attention to anymore. I used to curl up around the World Cup and watch as many games as humanly possible. I really did. But it's just not, it's not my thing. I'm just not, I'm not interested in it. It'll be interesting to see what happens from a political standpoint regarding the World Cup, security and things of that nature, because again, that's an interesting social dynamic to say the least. I don't want anything terrible to happen. But again, it's a highly politicized environment. And the more activities you have around such an event, the more, again, politicized it can become and the more radical people can become. And that's not a good thing. But again, at the exact same time, I understand it from a warfare standpoint is you never want to bend a knee. And trust me, I get that. I mean, you want to have these kinds of activities and you want to be inviting and you want all of this because you don't want to downplay the anniversary and you don't want to say, well, we're not going to have this event because we think there's a security concern. I mean, I get it. I fully understand. And again, I hope people have a safe, good time at all those activities and everything else. But like I just said, when you invite in all of those particular activities all at once, you should expect the politicizing of the entire event and all of those political games that come with it, because people, good people are going to be excluded and bad people are going to be excluded. And good people will be, again, participants and be invited, and bad people will be invited and will be open participants as well. So that's why I said, it's a tennis and a ping pong game back and forth. I can see it from lots of different angles, but I would say this. If I was to weigh it, I would just say I'm glad that they're happening more than they're not, I suppose. So it's not my cup of tea. I'm not going to watch it necessarily, but I will know that it exists, and certainly it will be memorable for a great deal of people. And yeah, if that's the point too, then so be it. That's the end of my rant on that. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, the thing that I really enjoy is the restoration of the city itself, fixing the buildings, fixing the statues. Again, there's proposals to erect more memorials. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I think all of that is good because that's just clean. Anything that has to do with hygiene, anything that has to do with landscaping, any renovations that get made from those standpoints, I always enjoy that. Picking up trash. See what I mean? I mean, it's real simple for me. I don't need a circus. Just pick up the trash. Cut the grass. Pressure wash something from time to time. I mean, this is the basic way that I think about this kind of stuff. I mean, I think that alone is inviting alone. You don't need fistfights and car races to bring people in. You can just clean up the joint. Have a nice place to eat without getting mugged by a black kid. I mean, this kind of stuff would be great. But yeah. And I know that that's happening, and that's fantastic. Certainly happened with the Trump Hotel. When he took over that old post office and turned it into a hotel, I mean, a lot of people showed up. He started to clean up the joint in his first term. It went to hell a little bit after that, but then again, he's back in and he's cleaning up the joint again. So, yeah, it's good. It's a good look. And this is what has to happen all across our nation, all of the time. Pick up the trash. Cut your grass. Pressure wash something from time to time. That's all. Build something. Renovate something. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe that would be my slogan if I ran for president. Instead of Make America Great Again, it would be cut your grass. Cut your lawn. Something like that. Pressure wash something. I don't think I'd get very far, but yeah. Brooks for president. Pick up your trash. I mean, not bad. I'll go with it. Okay, moving on here. During one of the hearings, I'll basically mention this because I thought this was interesting and wanted to do a little history dive on this one. During Marco Rubio's hearing, which was laughable to say the least. I mean, he was humiliating these congressmen and women and senators, but he brought up Cuba, as did members of Congress, and he mentioned GAESA, if I'm saying that correctly, GAESA, which stands for Grupo de Administración Imperial, I'm getting that wrong, don't care, SA. Apparently, I didn't know what this was, but it makes sense. And it's basically the military wing of Cuba and how they're the ones that really run the country. And Rubio openly said it. He said that they're the ones that run the country, it's not the government. So I did a little grok dive on this, and here's what it says. It says that it's a massive Cuban business conglomerate owned and operated by the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces. It's basically the island's military. It was founded in 1995 by Raul Castro, the Minister of Defense, later president, during Cuba's special period, quote-unquote, economic crisis after the Soviet Union's collapse, and the goal was to give the military a self-sustaining financial base by running profit-making enterprises. And basically, again, what Rubio said is they own everything. They're in charge of the economy there. So it says the following here. It says, as far as the leadership goes, historically run by high-ranking military officers, it was long led by General Luis Alberto Rodriguez Lopez Cailla, there's a mouthful, Raul Castro's son-in-law until his death in 2022, and it's currently headed by figures such as, no way I get that name. But let's give it a try. Ania Guillamania, no way. No way I got that. Lastris Maria. Well, I got the last part. Anyway, it controls an estimated, like I said, 40 to 70% of Cuba's economy. And most analysts put its gross profits near 37% of gross domestic product. Its revenues, have been described as 3 times the state budget. It operates as a secretive state within a state, with finances treated as military secrets and not subject to normal government audits. Now, this is basically a breakdown of what it runs and what it operates. Let's see, hotels, resorts, marinas, and tourism services, supermarkets, gas stations, shopping centers, etc., banks, of course, remittances and currency exchange, operations at the Mariel Special Development Zone and other ports, if I'm saying that correctly, and construction, imports, exports, fishing, real estate, and more. It's deeply intertwined with the Cuban government and military, but functions with significant autonomy. It is the dominant economic force on the island, generating hard currency, especially dollars, that critics say largely benefits military elites and regime insiders rather than the broader population or public services. While Cuba's civilian government and Communist Party exist, many analysts describe GAESA as the real center of power and economic control. It's long been a target of U.S. policy and was placed on the Cuba restricted list in 2020, and the Trump administration has expanded sanctions against it, including in 2026 under new executive authorities, aiming to cut off foreign companies doing business with GAESA-linked entities. This has led to hotel chains and payment processors exiting Cuba. And that right there is how you change a regime and destroy a country that has been a communist one for a long time, is you cut off the money. Now, unlike other regimes in the past, like in the Bolshevik Revolution, you wouldn't cut off the money and let everybody there starve to death. You would cut off the money, like what the United States is doing with them, and then you would intervene. And then again, you would install a proper government, preferably a constitutional republic of some kind, and then it's game on. And then again, you have them with their own security, and an ethical security, hopefully. Tourism increases. If people want to take a vacation to Cuba, they can. I don't know if the Cuban people are necessarily going to like that, but when it comes to money, and it comes to them, again, living a cleaner, more prosperous life, I think they would certainly want that. You would have to assume anyway. I've never been, probably will never go. I'll never go, I'll just say it. But even so, I would certainly say that why would the people of Cuba not want that? You would think that they would. And you would certainly think, again, that the American government would want to intervene there quickly and swiftly, and I think that they already have to a great extent, because this is one of the ways that you can use the CIA in a positive way, is to bring about freedom within these, again, war-torn and communistic countries. So I knew nothing about GAESA, but yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense that a communist military entity and a business entity would run an island like that as opposed to a government. Again, I'm not saying it's a good thing. Clearly it's not. But it makes sense that that's how communists would behave, is you let the military basically completely run things, certainly from a corrupt standpoint. I mean, the military is in charge of a great deal of what's going on in our country. I think that's slightly different. But at the same time, yeah, they would run a communist country. They wouldn't want elections. They would just, again, want to operate the way that they would want to operate and enslave as many people as possible. Now, let me slide over to this one. This is interesting, too. Again, a couple of moves here being made, and I don't think, certainly they're not accidental. We know that. And what these individuals know, I think, is rather vast, which is not a bad thing. First of all, you have Todd Blanche, who has now been nominated to be the DOJ head, which the next attorney general. I think this could be a very good thing. Again, he's Donald Trump's personal lawyer and certainly was for a great deal of time before entering the DOJ. He knows a great deal about what's really been going on this entire time, certainly when it comes to nationwide fraud and the 2020 election and Epstein files and the whole thing. I know people have criticized him for a number of different things. Again, I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs like they might. Those people that make hardline comments on particular things, I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think his confirmation hearing is going to be interesting. I'll try to watch as much as humanly possible when that hits the airwaves. But him being in charge of the DOJ, I don't think at face value is going to be a bad thing. Again, when politicians on both sides of the aisle panic because of a particular individual that gets picked by Donald Trump to run a particular organization, that usually means that they have a pretty good idea as to why that person has been selected. So that's kind of one of the face value tells, I think, to a great extent. There was also Bill Pulte. And this individual, again, I think has been selected for a very specified reason. This was over on Truth, and it was a Truth post made by @Rage Against the Illuminati. You can take this with a grain of salt if you want, but it makes sense to a great extent, because why would you not want a former insider? Certainly when it comes to banking, money transfers, fraud, to not be the head of the Director of National Intelligence and become the Director of National Intelligence after Tulsi Gabbard here. And again, we expect Tulsi Gabbard to release a lot of information here in the coming weeks before the end of the month when she resigns. And I think she did exactly what she was supposed to do. Again, very famously, and the clips still make the rounds, when she came out during a press secretary meeting there with all of the press in the gaggle room, and they're all sitting there, and she told them all about Obama, Clapper, Brennan, Comey, the whole thing late last summer. That was the beginning of the D class. That was huge. That was absolutely massive. And she is seeing this through, which is a good thing. But now you have Bill Pulte, and again, here's the particular post that was made on X and other places, I'm sure, on social media. It says the following, quote, "Trump just moved the man who has seen every mortgage, every bank record, and every financial transaction of his enemies into the chair that controls all 18 intelligence agencies. Bill Pulte, head of Fannie Mae, head of Freddie Mac, and man who oversees every home loan in America. Today he was appointed acting director of national intelligence. The media is laughing, quote, a housing guy running intelligence, quote unquote. They think it's incompetence. They think Trump made a mistake. They don't understand what just happened. For 18 months, Pulte has had access to the mortgage files of sitting congressmen, exposed fraudulent property claims by political operatives, opened investigations into financial records that were supposed to stay buried. One congressman filed a federal complaint last week claiming that Pulte accessed his confidential mortgage files without authorization. He didn't deny it. The same man sits above the CIA, above the NSA, above the FBI, now every classified database in the United States. A man who already knows where they live, what they own, who paid for it, and which names are on the deeds, now has access to where they travel, who they call, and what they hide. Tulsi left because her part was finished. The intelligence community has been restructured from the inside. The next phase does not require a diplomat. It requires a forensic accountant with top secret clearance. The hunt doesn't begin when you see the arrest. It begins when the man reading the files changes. June 9th, first sealed indictment unsealed, unquote. We will have to see. It does make sense, though. Again, Trump did it during his first administration, and I've brought it up here on the show lots of times. He appoints someone, and then that individual, again, changes things on the inside, and then he cuts them loose, respectfully so, in numerous cases, of course, and then he appoints an acting director. And then that acting director goes in, and they work to finish the job. So this has happened time and time again, and I think it's happening yet again here. Again, you have endless congressmen and senators all wrapped up in mortgage fraud. You have Stacey Abrams. You have the entire Black Lives Matter organization, very openly, of course, engaged in mortgage fraud and property fraud. And again, when you take stolen money and then you buy property, and maybe you're not paying as many taxes on that property as you should, that's all a problem. Filing the forms improperly. Of course, Adam Schiff is involved in that allegedly. The list is endless. But again, these people own numerous properties. Well, how did you obtain that money? That's kind of a big deal. So If this is one of the ways that a lot of these congressmen and women and senators get taken down is because they intentionally misfiled particular paperwork, among endless other things, then so be it. Again, it's the old Al Capone thing. I don't care if they go to jail for murder, prostitution, or tax evasion. Get them for something and lock them up. That's what the American people want to see. Now we've got this. The Supreme Court decisions that are going to be made here, again, certainly this month. At least that's what's predicted. Here in the month of June and, again, early July, before the summer recess. Here's what Grok says specifically about the breakdown of these particular cases and, of course, their significance and all the different kinds of cases. It says we've got Trump versus Barbara being the first one. This is the challenge to Trump's executive order attempting to end or limit birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. That's going to be huge. And again, all of this has direct implications, by and large, on our voting in our country. The next one is Trump versus Cook. President's authority to fire Federal Reserve Board member Lisa Cook, who was removed for cause protections. We have Trump versus Slaughter, which is president's power to fire the FTC commissioner Rebecca Slaughter, an independent agency removal protections. There's Mullen versus Al Otro Lado, or related. Trump administration policy of turning back asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border. Yes, please. Then there's Mullen versus Doe, efforts to end temporary protected status for Haitian and Syrian nationals. Yes, please. Transgender and social issues, Little versus Hecox out of Idaho, and West Virginia versus BPJ. State laws banning transgender women from participating in women's school sports teams. Yes, please. Again, it would be absolutely awesome if all of these went through, and I'm not even done yet. Second Amendment, we have Wolford versus Lopez, a Hawaii law restricting licensed gun owners from bringing firearms onto private property without explicit permission. Well, again, shall not be infringed. Pretty easy sentence to understand. United States versus Hemeny, federal ban on gun possession by habitual users of unlawful drugs. That's common sense, I think. Voting elections and campaign finance, we have Watson versus Republican National Committee, which is Mississippi law on counting mail-in ballots received shortly after Election Day. This is going to be a big one. And then National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee versus FEC, constitutionality of federal limits on coordinated spending by political parties and candidates. Again, it's going to be interesting when these decisions come down, and they tend to come down rather quickly. And then, of course, there's social outrage regardless of what takes place. And if the left loses and the communist left loses in any of these cases, well, again, their reaction is going to be very predictable. So head on a swivel regarding those, but massive implications here for our country going forward. Certainly from an election standpoint, because again, elections should take place on Election Day. We should have paper ballots. We should have all of this. Again, Save America Act needs to be passed. This is all being delayed on purpose right now. Because then, of course, the right assumes, and the reason that they're delaying it is because if and when they get replaced during the midterms here, at least that's the prevailing theory from their standpoint, because they've always used midterms in that kind of a game. That, again, they play, let's kick the can down the road and we'll just throw our hands up in the air and shrug our shoulders and say, well, there's nothing we can do because we're outnumbered now. Sorry, Mr. President. Sorry, American people. And then they laugh their asses all the way to the bank. I don't think that's going to happen this time around. And it's going to put them in a major pickle here. So again, do I think the Save America Act is going to be passed this year? No, I don't. I think, again, that the Republicans, unfortunately, are doing what they do. Again, they're all neocons. They're all the same. It's, again, it's wings on the same bird. We fully get it. But they're doing this on purpose, again, because they want to delay it because they're anticipating losing. But if they win, and they have a vast majority, there's absolutely no reason to not pass it. So then they're in a political pickle, and then they're screwed. But that'll be interesting to see also. But again, too many of these decisions have too much to do with the future of our country, and this is a big, big time, and it's a big, big deal. So I want to move on to this, and I'll end with this, and this has to do with some executive orders that were signed, one in particular, by Donald Trump the other day, and it was implementing scheduled policy career in the accepted service. This basically has to do with firing bureaucrats the way that you would fire somebody in a general work environment who isn't working for the government. That it basically gives, again, the individuals overseeing these particular people the ability to just fire them quickly, which is a damn good thing. Here's what Grok says based on the summary here. It breaks it down. It says the executive order signed by President Trump formally implements schedule policy/career, a new category in the accepted service, evolving from the first term Schedule F concept. It moves specific senior policy influencing federal positions out of standard civil service protections to increase accountability while maintaining merit-based hiring. Emphasizes that the president needs reliable subordinates to execute laws and priorities, targets policy influencing positions, confidential policy determining, policy making, etc., makes it easier to remove employees for poor performance or misconduct, balances this with rewards for strong performance and merit-based hiring. I don't know anybody who would be against that, unless you're part of the deep state and you want to remain. That's basically it. More specific with this, it says agencies must notify affected employees and update records within 7 days. Future renumbering or realignments do not remove them from the schedule. Reports indicate that this affects roughly 8,000 positions government-wide. Regulatory changes, classify status, probationary periods, and removal procedures for these positions. Exempt them from certain adverse action or trial period protections, allowing faster separations for performance or misconduct, and preserve competitive status in some cases and integrate with programs like Pathways. Again, standard disclaimers, it does not create new rights, must be implemented per law appropriations and servability clauses, etc. It wraps up and it says that the overall impact revives and operationalizes efforts to make senior policy roles more responsive to elected leadership by reducing job protections, easier firings and reassignments, while keeping hiring merit-based. It's drawn criticism from unions over potential politicization. Of course, why wouldn't it? They're unions, after all. And the full appendix PDF, of course, can detail the entire thing, and that, of course, is available over on the White House's website as well. Yeah, it's a way to get rid of bureaucrats. I'm all for it. Why not? Again, if you work for somebody, certainly like the President of the United States, then you kind of have to do what he wants done. And if you don't, well, you can quit or you can be fired. But the deep state digs in like ticks because that's what they do. And then again, they basically say, well, you can't fire me. I'm a government employee. Well, this says, F you, we can, and we will. And we're going to speed up this process. And if you don't give us the paperwork that we want, and well, if you just don't do your job, you're gone. No different than firing somebody who works for a corporation or a company. Same kind of thing. Revise your process, streamline it, make it quicker, and get rid of them. This is how you drain the swamp. This is a good thing. Okay, education. Here we go. On Spectrum News the other day, there was a story having to do with 100 school districts in Ohio, approximately, that are facing financial crises that could lead to closures or other measures. Not surprising. Even more specifically, the Columbus City Schools, where they have a boatload of individuals who are going to get cut, approximately 299, where there's been 62 approximate cuts that were made earlier this year. Again, this is happening not just within the Columbus City Schools, which is, of course, the largest school district in the entire state, but this is happening all over the place. A few more examples. Cleveland Metropolitan School District approved closing and merging to reduce by 29 schools from 88 by the 26-27 school year, involving mergers of pre-K through 8 and high schools, with approximately 18 buildings closing. This addresses steep enrollment decline, down approximately 50% over 2 decades, and avoids state takeover. They're screwed. Again, this is hilarious because this is what the communist will tell you. A communist will tell you, certainly endless school board members, as we all know, but they'll all tell you that this is being done because of only state funding. That's not it. It's not just that more state funding is going toward more school choice, quote unquote, and more successful opportunities for children, i.e. private schools, charter schools, homeschooling, etc. Which, of course, unfortunately, homeschooling is not included in the voucher system here in Ohio unless you use the state homeschooling online program. But even so, that's not the only reason that individuals are leaving the system. It falls back on the Great Awakening. People are waking up, and when they wake up, they don't fall back asleep. When they see how deliberate the brainwashing has been, generation after generation after generation, you snap that cycle of abuse, and then you stop going permanently. There's too many positive options out there. When you combine that with a lower birth rate, when you combine that with a bad product that you're selling on a government basis, all the activities, quote unquote, that take place, all the gay stuff, not learning, no literacy, running people through the system, graduating them without the ability to read. I mean, all of this is happening, and this isn't even new. This has been happening for decades. But because of social media, because of the reporting, because of the exposure, that's when you draw all of this darkness out into the light and everybody can see it for what it really is. Again, it's a dead-end business. If you ask the individuals who still work within the business, they'll probably all tell you the exact same thing. Certainly the awake ones, which there are very few in the business, but they'll tell you they're just trying to hold on, quote unquote. Well, I'm just trying to hold on for retirement. I have 5 years left, 10 years left. I'm hoping the business sticks around long enough and that I don't get cut during that time so I can just hold on. That's slavery. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's just slavery. What a terrible way to live. To wish away time so that you can no longer do the thing that you once wanted to do with a great deal of passion and knowledge and care for American people, to then reach a particular point where you're so worn down, you're basically praying for time to go by so that you can receive a pension. I mean, Jesus, that's just, it's just miserable. But again, this is happening, and it's of their own making. I mean, that's the big problem here too. It goes on. As one would expect, there's other districts. Examples include Lorraine, where 100 plus teachers and staff were laid off. This was apparently amid a $17 million plus shortfall and scattered cuts elsewhere, like Amherst, Elria, if I'm saying that right, Akron as well. Many districts are trimming staff due to deficits. Well, not the one where I live. They're spending money like it grows on trees, and it's not going out of business, which means they're going to try to put a levy on a ballot sometime, and they won't get it, which means then they're going to have to go back to making cuts again. You'd think these people would learn that when you get a little bit of money, you should just sit on it because you don't know what the state's going to do, but the state is bigger than you. And what they say goes, which means they basically control the money all of the time. Again, you would think that school districts would understand this. Unfortunately, they don't. It also says broader financial pressure. Over 100 to 124 districts out of approximately 611 project negative cash balances or deficits by 2029. the highest rate since the Great Recession. Factors include enrollment drops, costs, and funding. Well, your costs are driven by your shitty decision-making. All the stupid things that you buy have to be maintained, so stop buying them. School districts have to stop pretending that they need all of the technological wares, games, and gimmicks that they've been adopting, because all of that is company money that they're just giving to other companies. What happened to a teacher actually teaching? What happened to the individual teacher actually teaching content as opposed to just opening up a screen and just letting the screen and the company teach the child? I've said it before. I'll say it again. Public schools are advocating for home learning. The only difference is that they're doing it for 8 hours a day, whereas home learning is approximately 2 hours a day. Think of all of the other things that a child could learn with that extra 6+ hours. In fact, they'd probably be so interested in learning, they wouldn't stop learning. They wouldn't go, well, 8 hours is done at home, I guess I should just quit. They'll probably keep learning. And they certainly don't say, and you can ask a homeschooling child, whether or not they stop learning after 2 hours. They don't. They love learning. They love exploring. They love picking up new knowledge and, again, learning new things, seeing new things, hearing about new things that you'll never get in a school environment because it's government restriction. And this next story is exactly what government restriction causes. This is from the College Fix. It was titled, "English Professor Warns Today's Students Cannot Read or Focus on Lengthy Assignments." This was from June 3rd, written by a Jennifer Cabany. It says the following. Another professor has joined the chorus of scholars warning that students' reading skills and attention spans are abysmal. It says, writing in the Chronicle of Higher Education, literature professor Tyler Jacht told of an assignment for his rhetoric and writing class that asked students to read a 20-page paper. Not one student finished the paper. Quote, "It was the same length I had assigned for 5 years and the same length I had read without complaint as an undergraduate a decade ago," wrote Jack, who has taught literature and critical writing at Mercer University, James Madison University, and Wake Forest University. Quote, "When I asked why, a student answered honestly, it was too long, and she kept losing track of what the paper was about. This was not a remedial class. These were students who had cleared the admissions process and written essays good enough to get them here. Yet a routine academic reading assignment had defeated them." Unquote. This professor was not alone in sounding the alarm on students' lack of reading skills and attention spans today. As College Fix has previously reported, some college students struggle to even read a handful of sentences. Some Ivy League students can't finish an entire book. In fact, some students do not have enough of an attention span to finish a movie anymore. Jacht, the professor, in his piece in the Chronicle, cited 3 main problems contributing to the situation: the ramifications of smartphones, artificial intelligence, and Common Core. Well, I'd say, I'd say there's a few more than just that. That's a bit dismissive. Let me take it a little deeper just for a second before I finish the article, and again, there's only a couple of paragraphs left. I've always stated that one of the reasons that students fail or don't achieve or can't complete particular tasks, if you work it backwards, it's because the tasks themselves are monotonous. They're monotonous, they're repetitive, and they never teach the actual truth. Because what's not encouraged, both at the K-12 level and, of course, within so-called higher education, is an immersion within subject matter, actual study. To dive into, again, for example, I would basically say this, to self-examine. Self-examine, like, for example, if you're in the teacher education business as a whole. If you were a teacher education student, you would have to examine the entire landscape of all of teacher education and what it's produced. Is it producing, again, a good product? The answer is no. And then someone would say, well, show me the study. And then if I was a professor, I would say, well, there isn't one. There are many that show the decline, many reasons for the decline, but why is it that there isn't a longitudinal study when it comes to return on investment or satisfaction, because there is no satisfaction. There is no return on investment, which means now you're talking about corruption. But see, these schools of education, so to speak, regardless of the particular study, they don't dive into corruption. They don't dive into why the education business is corrupt through and through, because you can't do that while you're in the business, and you can't do it while you're studying about the business. I'm sure there are other professors in other schools of study that actually cover corruption, but the education business is not one of them. You have to assume that schools of business, schools of management, schools of economics, that they cover corruption. They would have to. Of course, it has a political bend, which is unfortunate, and it really isn't any different in the education business. But they're just not being told the truth because they're not being taught the truth, because the activities then that they're being asked to do are not truthful. The other reason, too, is that there's too much collaborative learning. Collaborative learning, I think I've brought up on the show a few times, certainly early on at this show's inception back in 2020 and probably parts of 2021. But collaborative learning is exactly what you would think it is. It's group projects, and that's a huge problem. Because from an instructional standpoint, group projects are lazy. I'm not diminishing the importance of what could be collaborative learning occasionally. But I've always said, and this is probably why I wasn't hired, is I always said that teacher-directed instruction is the way that it's supposed to be. There are lots of ways to instruct, but the foundation has got to lie with the teacher/professor. They're the ones that have the knowledge. They're the ones that have been in the business. They're the ones, again, you would hope anyway, have the knowledge, but that they would be the ones that would be telling the truth. But even so, even if that's the case, it's up to the individual student to be an individual learner. And when you're stripped of all of that, and you have to believe the instructor and everything that they say, and then you have to do the assignments that the instructor tells you to do, in particular nowadays, when the vast majority of it is collaborative learning, there is no individuality. And then they find out the hard way when they become a school teacher that it's all individual. You have to be an individual instructor. You're not going to be team teaching with people on a great in many situations, I should say. There are some, unfortunately, certainly at the elementary level, there's a lot of team teaching that takes place. I've always thought that was fat, stupid, and lazy because, again, team teaching by and large is a problem. You have individuals, again, looking at one another as instructors and saying, okay, which subject do you feel comfortable teaching and which would you not feel comfortable teaching? And then two instructors get together and they decide what subjects they like more than the other. Imagine that. Imagine being a mechanic and being like, nope, I only like changing tires. Because basically that's the only thing that you know how to do. But you're a mechanic. You're supposed to know lots of different things when it comes to being a mechanic, not just changing tires. This is the problem with the education business, is they pass off responsibility. Instructors do it, and then they encourage students to do it, and then students do it, and then students believe, falsely, that that's exactly how they're supposed to teach, and also that's how they're supposed to learn. That they can only learn something if somebody explains something to them, or a group of people explain something to them. They could never have an inner monologue. They could never ask themselves a question and actually immerse themselves in a subject, read books like written in BC times, heaven forbid, from ancient philosophers. Combine that, of course, with what's going on now, and then connect those dots. See, collaborative learning, certainly from an instructional standpoint and from a higher education instructional standpoint as well, takes away from critical thought. You can't critically think in a group of people. Not unless, of course, everybody's critically thinking at the exact same time. But being an individual educator, again, is what they sign up for. You sign up to be on your own. You sign up to be self-sufficient. That's the idea. And unfortunately, that's not what they're told, and that's not what they're taught. So they enter college and they don't have any individualized skills because they've been doing group projects and group bullshit and follow the leader and, follow the clique and follow the masses and play this game and dress this way and do this and do that. And they don't have any individualized thought because there's no silence, there's no immersion, there's no study. They don't know how to study. They think that the word study means I only have to study if I'm going to be evaluated. I only have to study something if I'm going to take a test. No, that's not how life works. You study particular subjects, usually, at least I've always found them to be the most interesting, when you've been lied to. And when you want to find out what the real truth is. But you can't do that if you're working in a group where everybody's just agreeing to get something done. Certainly, I should say, at the college level or at the high school level where, people are just working on some kind of a class project. I mean, again, the individual sometimes, and you can see this in those very stereotypical and yet cliche science fairs, where the individual will have a better science project than the group. Because it's the individual who is the inventor. It's the individual who is the creator. The group just agree to do a particular thing, and then everybody gets credit for the same thing. That's just not the way that it works when they become an actual instructor and a paid instructor. The article wraps up and it says, this was, again, a quote from the professor, quote, "My students from districts that protected sustained reading through small class sizes, strict phone policies, and faculty who refuse to teach to the test will arrive with their attention relatively intact," he wrote. Quote, "My students from districts that surrendered to devices and standardized testing arrive cognitively winded," unquote. Well, cognitively winded. Yeah, that's an understatement. They're retarded. That's really that's the bigger problem. They're not bright. They haven't been challenged, and they're not challenging themselves even as a daily habit. Last paragraph, it says, "A democracy that requires a literate electorate is now training one fraction of that electorate out of literacy while marketing to the other a deep work, quote-unquote, lifestyle as a luxury good. The students who cannot read a 20-page article today are the voters who will not be able to read a bill, or the jurors who cannot follow a closing argument tomorrow," unquote. That's a good point. And they're right. They're also going to be unemployed, shockingly disappointed, and they won't know why. And it's because, again, they're either chasing money or they end up being individuals who, again, are completely stripped of any individualized thought. And then they find lines of work that cater to that characteristic, which, again, is molded into them, unfortunately, by a brainwashing system. It's sad. But you can have collaborative thought, and you can have, again, collaborative learning. But it helps if you have individuals who already individually think as individuals first, rather than have individuals who are consistently having their individuality beaten out of them through, again, poor instruction, or "I don't care about your opinion," or "you'll never get anywhere with that attitude." I mean, it's people that say stuff like that that is really the problem. That's really just a poison for the brain. And it's unfortunate, but it is pervasive. And again, you see the fruits of all of that to some extent. You see, again, people recognizing that it's not a good thing, and then they leave. College enrollment drops, university enrollment drops, K-12 enrollment drops, and then as a result, those businesses, institutions, quote unquote, have to change what they're doing. Certainly colleges and universities, one of the first moves they make when their enrollment drops is they raise tuition prices. That's not inviting. That's a bad product. No one's coming to your t-shirt shop anymore because your t-shirts blow. So all you're going to do now is raise the cost of your t-shirts. Good business model. I wasn't a business major. I've never run a business before, but I know you don't do that, but that's what they're doing. Look at what the K-12 business is doing. They're continuing to roll out all of their gay agenda, their terrible instruction, their inadequate instruction, their lack of real history. They fire the people who tell the truth. They fire the people who challenge the mainstream. Certainly, again, encourage students to question the media and question everything that they're learning. Bring up very specified examples. Encourage their students to go home and watch free documentaries like Europa: The Last Battle. And then before you know it, you get a note in your inbox that says, "Meet me in the principal's office as an employee." And then you're reprimanded because a parent complained about some instruction you were receiving, and then that's the end of your job and that's the end of your career. It's just not an environment that is conducive for the open and free exchange of information, which means it's not a successful business model, and it's not going to be. So don't expect it to change, because it won't. It will get worse. Case in point, last one here on education. This is from the Federalist. June 4th, specifically, race grifters yanked tests from UC admissions, boosting STEM students who can't do middle school math. How many more of these stories can we possibly have? It says the disadvantaged students leftists claim to champion are suffering the most from ending college entrance requirements in math, threatening California's future. More than 1,200 faculty members from the University of California have signed an open letter urging university leadership to reinstate the SAT and ACT math testing requirements for applicants to math and science majors, beginning with the 2027 admissions cycle. Many leftists argue that standardized tests like SAT and ACT perpetuate so-called systemic racism and widen racial disparities in education. They have pushed to abolish these racist tests, quote unquote, in the name of equity. And these efforts gained momentum in 2020 amid COVID-19 lockdowns and the national racial hatred efforts following George Floyd's death. Again, we know the translation of all of that. I'm not going to read the whole article because it's not worth it. I mean, you get it. It's all race-based, and basically if certain races can't pass certain tests a particular way or meet a particular standard, then they scream racism. The test is racist. Not the test subject is retarded, but the test is racist itself. No, it isn't. This is another example which I've brought up here a million times before, is that the middle way and the middle answer, again from a 30,000-foot view, is usually the answer. The SAT and the ACT are not determining factors of success. They just aren't. It's just like saying if somebody graduates from a particular institution, then they're more likely to be successful. That correlation is equally as ridiculous, because there is no correlation. I graduated from Harvard. I'm going to be happier and wealthier than somebody who graduated from Indiana State University. Just throwing out a random example, but again, you get what I'm saying. One thing has nothing to do with the other. If a college professor or a college admissions person is looking at an SAT and an ACT test, and then looking at the name or the last name of the person who took it and looking again at that score on a college admission application, and they're basically saying, well, the reason they didn't do well is because it's racist, and of course that is bigoted in itself, because you're basically looking at the name of a black kid or a Hispanic kid and basically saying, okay, they didn't pass it because they're black or Hispanic. I mean, that's the soft bigotry of the left at face value. But at the same time, it's a false comparison. The fact is they're just not taught the material properly. It's an instruction problem. That's a great deal of it too. Of course, they don't want to look in the mirror and recognize that, and they certainly, as higher education, don't want to blame lower education, even though they do all of the time. But that's also, again, the real problem. ACT and SAT preparation is very limited. in a very small amount of time within a person's high school career. I mean, it's a dot on a calendar. It takes next to zero time. They spend maybe a week, 2 weeks out of whatever it is, 4 some odd years. Maybe it's a little more than that, depending on the institution. But again, for what? What is it for? Again, my point is that the real answer lies in the middle. The left and the right can debate it all they'd like back and forth. But the fact is that it's a combination of false emphasis on measuring markers and then bad instruction also. It's both, along with endless other things. You put all this emphasis on ACT, SAT scores, and at the same time, when individuals test poorly, you basically say, okay, everybody's testing poorly on these tests, so let's just get rid of the parameter altogether. You don't have to get rid of the parameter altogether. Just make the instruction better. Make again the daily, day in, day out instruction within classroom settings better. Doesn't surprise me they don't understand science and math. They're told lies in science and math. It's lying instruction, which means it boils down to that same thing that I've said all of the time. Typically, when you have a valedictorian, you have an individual who has just memorized the most lies. That's all. People who don't pass the SAT or ACT or don't get very good scores, usually they don't have a very good tolerance for lying. Or they think that the instruction is terrible and then they just don't care because there's an emotional component to it also. And they Christmas tree the test and they just don't give a shit about it. Not to mention, one last thing before I end the show here on a COVID note, which is an interesting little story, but it backs up on the collaborative learning thing. What's collaborative about taking an ACT test and an SAT test? Nothing. There's nothing collaborative about it. That's the most individualized assessment on a piece of paper that a person can engage in outside of literally handwriting and their own essay of sorts without using an AI system. An actual individualized thought that comes out of their own brain that they don't work with other people on. That's why they're failing the SAT and ACT also. It's not just because they can't read. It's not just because of social media and artificial intelligence and cell phones and screen time and all of that. That's not those aren't the only reasons. Those are contributors. But it's because too much collaborative learning, not enough individualized emphasis on study and immersion. It all comes full circle. Okay, enough rambling on that. Last one, and this seems kind of big. Not getting a lot of attention, and you'll know why in just a moment. This is from lionessofjudah.substack.com. Exposing the Darkness is the name of their page. Titled, Breaking Pfizer Whistleblower Found Dead Hours After Publishing Explosive COVID Vaccine Fraud Allegations. Another one bites the dust here. Here's a particular social media post that they made. This is from a Christine Cotton official at @StatChrisCotton on X. And this was translated in English from French. It says the following, quote, "It is June 2nd, 2026. By the time you read these lines, I will have left this world. For those who do not know me, my name is Christine Cotton. I am what is known as a whistleblower. I worked for 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry in the management and analysis of clinical data. As a biostatistician, since December of 2020, I have immersed myself in the documents of the COVID vaccine from the Pfizer laboratory. I have written numerous documents and done many broadcasts to share the real results. My conclusions are catastrophic. Beyond the invalidity of the results due to errors or even manifest frauds. They said the Pfizer vaccine that the population received, that you may have received, is not the one from the clinical trial with the 95% efficacy announced by all politicians, journalists, and TV doctors. Well, no kidding. You were administered a product for which there were absolutely no results, neither of efficacy nor of tolerance. This message is not intended to create sensationalism on social networks, but to inform you of one of the biggest manipulations that humanity has ever known. All the evidence is in the latest version of my work, which I invite you to download and read. For the lazier ones, the very busy, the few pages of the conclusion, and the links to the source documents will already enlighten you a great deal. I fell ill at the very moment I filed a complaint against the health authorities. For over a year, I've been suffering from excruciating pain, starting from the lower back down to my legs, burning sensations in the skin, mainly in the legs and back. I've consulted general practitioners, neurologists, osteopaths, virologists, dermatologists, rheumatologists, psychiatrists, homeopaths, and I've swallowed thousands of capsules of dietary supplements, anxiolytics, neuroleptics, painkillers prescribed by the pain center. I've even done bioresonance sessions and seen magnetizers, and this without any result. I am at the end of what I can bear. I ask forgiveness from those who love me. You who have followed me on social networks for 4 years, my friends, my parents, and above all to God, or whatever his nature or name may be, to end my life. I, who have never ceased to protect it since childhood, whether plant, animal, or human life. From the bottom of my heart, I thank those who have supported me, encouraged me, and all those who pray or have organized prayer groups. I'm going to ask you to pray once more so that my soul may be in the light of the Creator as soon as possible, unquote. And then below her X account, clearly written by somebody else, it says, out of respect and dignity in the face of his sisters and his parents' grief, please do not attempt to contact them. The funeral will be held in the strictest privacy with his sister and his parents. Thank you for understanding. Again, there's some pictures of her on there and the whole thing. She killed herself, essentially. It says again, well, not essentially, she just did. But it says in her suicide note, posted on June 2nd, she declared that Pfizer COVID vaccine, again injected into billions, was not the one from the clinical trials. That again isn't surprising. Whether she took the shots herself or not is not known, at least not to me. I don't know if she did or she didn't. If she was experiencing health problems as a result of taking it. Unfortunately, there are endless other individuals, again, who have taken their own lives as a result of not just finding out what they found out, but taking their own lives as a result of the horrible side effects that have come with it, certainly, again, among the injected. But even so, there have been endless individuals who have been targeted by government and, again, with very serious weapons to hurt them and make the physical ailments that they have as a result of being targeted, again, specifically by elements like the wireless body area network and related elements. And that alone has caused individuals either to die as a result of the side effects or, again, to take their own life. But it's a casualty in a war. It's remarkably unfortunate. I'm certainly not going to ever diminish such a thing. It's beyond serious. But this right here, again, is what the mainstream media will never tell anybody. They'll never report on this. They'll never bring it up. And that's the damn misery of the whole thing. Is because if they did, certainly based on 2 Q posts, there's Q post 111, which is a long one. And at the bottom, it says again, the complete picture would put 99% of Americans, the world, in a hospital. And then there's post 142, again a long one, and at the very end, toward the end, it says the truth would put 99% of people in the hospital. And the reason for that, again, is well, lots of reasons. Suicide being one of them, targeted attacks, individuals telling the truth and then being attacked after the fact, and then, of course, suicide. Not to mention illness in general, from taking whatever the government tells them to take. Again, no one reads those Q posts. Nobody reads those and runs to a pharmacy to inject themselves. Nobody. I have to bring this up too because it's in the same word search. There was Q post 3926 on April 9th of 2020. at the height of the COVID lie. And all they did was link a Breitbart article that says the following: CBS News caught broadcasting fake hospital footage, second time. And Q only said this: the truth is right in front of you. They were telling you it was fake. They were telling you that COVID wasn't real. They were all over this in 2020. You read any of these posts in 2020, again, there's no way you injected yourself. So, again, it's an unfortunate loss. I don't know, again, if she was jabbed or she wasn't, or if she was deliberately attacked with, again, energy weapons and things of that nature, because those do exist. But either way, it is a massive loss. But, yeah, there have been many. And unfortunately, she's not going to be the only one. But ladies and gentlemen, again, sorry to end on a sad note, but either way, it is, again, a casualty of war. I don't know what else to say about it. The war rages on here, so yeah, heads on a swivel, be vigilant, and use common sense, and think as an individual. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Monday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.